Happy New Year and welcome to the first roundup of 2024. We've got so much to get into, so let's go. Firstly, thank you so much for the support you showed me over the course of 2023. It's time we do it all over again. If you haven't yet subscribed, please do that. It's free to do so. Leave a like too. And in the comments down below, give me your thoughts. Was it a happy new year for your club or not? Let's begin with the first game. It's Reading against Exeter. So it finished Reading 3, Exeter 2, the XG 1.12 to 1.21. The first relegation six-pointer of 2024 didn't disappoint as Reading climb out of the bottom four, while Exeter, they fall inside it. Let's begin with Reading first. It won't go down as Reading's most convincing performance of the season, but when it comes to season state, we speak about game state quite a lot, but season state is very important. It is a very crucial way of beginning the year. Finding a way to win is a brilliant trait to develop, and when you're in a dogfight against a fellow relegation rival who's in the same dogfight as you, the Reading character was crucial. That's now 6 games unbeaten for the home side as they move out of the bottom 4 for the first time since early September. For Exeter to come back twice and equalise twice and still travel home with nothing, that'll be the headline frustration. But the improvements in the attacking phase are notable, and we'll come on to them further later. Sloppiness defensively, though, is really the biggest downfall here at poor stages of the game. Fundamentally, that aspect of their performance is the reason why Exeter do travel home with nothing. There are positive signs and food for thought on reflection, but ultimately it's a results-based business, and right now Exeter, they're struggling to get those results, and they start the new year falling in the bottom 4. Let's take a look at the graph in front of you now. The smaller bars do suggest this game was always not so free-flowing, but when you look at the league positions, it's probably not a massive surprise. Both teams did have spells across the 90 minutes, but clear-cut chances were few and far between. When looking at the stats, as the graph did show us just a second ago, between boxes, this game was fairly tidy and pretty even for the most part. Both teams completed over 300 passes. Exeter attempted just over 500. They normally say around 250 passes is what a better team should be aiming for, and Exeter, who have struggled, aren't in good form, were trying to pass the ball and look good in possession. As we'll again go on to in just a second, it's really when you head into both boxes, that's where the problems lie. But, like I said in the introduction, it's the careless defending that lets the away side down. The build-up and confidence with the ball is fine, but you can't defend like Exeter did at times yesterday afternoon. Go and watch that second goal. That is just a disgrace. It's totally unacceptable, and the reason why they find themselves in this really tricky position. When looking at the stats from a wider perspective, both teams had 2 shots on target. Of course, Reading converted both of theirs. Exeter, in the forward phase, did show glimpses. They created 2 big chances and a higher expected goals than their opposition. An improvement inside, and I'll emphasise the word inside both boxes, and Exeter could be travelling home with much more than they did. Of course, they came home with nothing, so a better outcome would have been the first place to start. When touching on key players, Aziz, Wing and Nibs all played a crucial role in attacking for Reading. I think if I had to pick one, I would go Harvey Nibs. It's a well-timed run for the first goal and a really impressive aspect of work rate to create the second. He accumulated 5 passes into the final third and completed 100% of his dribbles. He was really impressive, and Reading, they earn a crucial point at home. At the Valley, it finishes Charlton 1, Oxford United 2, the XG 0.8 to exactly 1. In a game between two sides out of form, Oxford's second half moment of magic from Ossian Smith piles on even more pressure at the Valley. For Charlton, that's now 7 at League One games without a win and 3 straight defeats in the division. For Michael Appleton, something needs to change and quick. A fast start did look promising, but a lack of consistent threat in creativity, it made taking the game to Oxford almost impossible at times. It's January and fresh faces are needed. A playoff push does look unlikely, but that missing identity must be established first. We'll touch on the identity or the lack of identity for Charlton in a few moments' time. But before we go into detail on that, let's touch on Oxford United. It's a late win that feels very significant. The heartbreak of Friday hasn't phased this stretched group. All of a sudden, things look okay again. A change of system, players out of position, plenty of pre-match doubt. It was a battle at times, but the boys in blue at the key moments, they stood up, they were counted, and they got things right. It was Des Buckingham's first away win as Oxford United manager, a win where all of the big calls that he made, I think he got right. Ossian Smith, the progressive, goal-scoring centre-half, who'd have thought? Let's touch on the momentum graph brought to you by SofaScore. It was an equal first half. Charlton started quickly and scored as Oxford, I think, slowly grew into this game. For a good 35 minutes, Oxford had full control of the second half. The away side looked far more comfortable in possession and looked like the only side brave enough to win the game. We're looking at the stats in front of you now. As expected, the possession numbers fall in the favour of Oxford. As the graph showed, Charlton couldn't get a grasp after the break. The away side only managed one shot on target in the second half, only stringing 154 passes together. The lack of Charlton identity will be their biggest concern. A lack of goal threat, both in build-up and in output, less than 1 expected goals. A defensive approach in the second half with an inconsistent threat on the turnover. They've got injuries, they've now got January. But firstly, Michael Appleton must establish what he's trying to build and how he's trying to build it, because the style of play right now is non-existent. And the fans, they're calling for his head. And it's still very, very early in his tenure, because it's not a robust, well-organised outfit yet. It's not effective when they go long, it's not possession based, and sometimes they look quick, direct and effective on the break, but only sometimes. It's not consistent and there's no consistent and clear identity. The bottom line is, I don't think they've got a clue yet, and January, around the corner, they've got to recruit to a certain style. Without knowing that style, that could be a really difficult strategy to get right. Let's touch on the average positions. Injuries meant Oxford changed their shape completely, starting with a flexible 5-4-1 and 3-6-1 actually when going forward. Ocean Smith, operating as a right-sided centre-back, worked brilliantly. His distribution and long ball ability, so many times, stretched the play and allowed Oxford to use the wide areas, even with no traditional wingers. We've got so many injuries in the wide areas and across the pitch, but especially when you look at our wingers. So, using wing-backs was another way of going about this. Des Buckingham's style of play focuses on the wide areas and the width. The wing-backs of Stevens and Bennett still gave Oxford the ability to be effective out wide. The heat maps will show this. When you look at how wide and advanced they operated across the 90 minutes, it was really, really impressive. Ocean Smith would drift almost as a right-back sometimes, Brown as a left-back. They operated actually as wide centre-backs in this formation that still allowed Bennett and Stevens to play high up for a lot of the game. The pair created 6 chances across the 90 minutes and touched the ball a combined 134 times. It may have been forced, but the change in shape worked a treat. When looking at key players, Charlton are in a crisis, but captain George Dobson, he remains the shining light. All positive Charlton moves went through George Dobson, especially in the first half. He touched the ball 72 times and made 13 passes into the final third. He won 10 duels, was involved in 13 defensive actions. His ability to win the ball back and play in transition was incredible at times, and in the first half was unplayable. For Oxford, which he's been mentioned, Finn Stevens, he was brilliant, by far his best Oxford United performance yet. It's a great whipped cross for the first goal. He created 5 big chances, made 7 passes into the final third, and defensively hardly put a foot wrong. As a right wing back, Finn Stevens is so much better suited. In a back four, his best attributes can't be utilised. You look at Finn Stevens and his best Oxford showings this season, Shrewsbury at home, stands out once again playing as a wing back. He's so much better and can be really effective in the forward areas. Next up, Pompey 2, Stevenage 1. The XG 1.32 to 0.93. After 3 games without a win, John Massinio's men are back on track. They remain top of Sky Bet League 1. Let's touch on Pompey first. The Pompey Christmas crumble is over. Massinio's boys in blue are back on track. It wasn't always pretty, it wasn't always the Massinio way, but getting over the line when you're on a bit of a rut, digging deep, should be the headline. The signs of a team that are ready to kick back into gear. As the graph will show us in just a moment, the second half was hard work, but against a confident, organised, promotion-pushing outfit, I think they'll probably take a 2-1 win at home. Let's touch on Stevenage. By no means was Stevenage humbled. In fact, after the break, a point from this game wouldn't have felt like a total robbery. In the second half, Stevenage, I think, altered their stereotype, and I want to touch on that again later on. The stereotype of Stevenage, I think, was changed when looking at their second half performance, and they've been doing it under the radar for a lot of the season. More on that later. It was front-footed, it was progressive, and, as I'll show you again, it was very brave. Really brave in the second half. Steve Evans will feel his side matched the league leaders for large parts, and with better finishing, they could have come away with some points. Let's touch on the graph in front of you now. It was almost a game of two halves. It's cliche, I don't like saying it. Sometimes it can be overused, but I actually think it is true for large parts of this. Pompey were much better before the break, and Stevenage definitely grew into this clash. We speak about taking advantage of your key moments, while Portsmouth and Stevenage both converted during their most dominant spells in the first half. After the break, it was Stevenage who showed the forward intentions, a slightly more clinical showing, and this half could have been looked at very differently. When looking at the statistical aspects of this match, the first half felt like Pompey were back to their best. It was dominant, it was controlling, it was creative, and it had output. 56% possession, 12 shots on target, both of their big chances were converted. That's the attacking side that's been missing in recent weeks. We spoke earlier about Stevenage breaking their own stereotype. I think it's really interesting that we go into detail on that. We often think about an overly robust, pragmatic, super direct and quite unattractive style. Actually, this season, that's not always been the case. This is a graph brought to you by SofaScore from the Stevenage win against Northampton last week. It was totally controlled, often intricate, very patient, and provided 3 well-worked goals. We sometimes could expect them being very happy to allow the opposition to have possession and pick their moments to attack. Similar, in some cases, to Derby and the way they approach things in the forward areas. But you can see here, plenty of green. They had more possession, completed more passes than Northampton. It was dominant. It was possession based. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. And again, it's Northampton, but they're in a very good place right now. They're 9th in the league. They're a good side in League One this season. They had the bravery to have more of the ball and be able to score 3 goals and be creative within that. It's a really interesting stereotype that I think is being changed and not being spoken about enough when looking into League One and the way that Stevenage are approaching this season. Stevenage had more possession and completed more passes in this game, and I can tell you in the second half yesterday at Fratton Park, it was exactly the same. Don't always turn your noses up at Stevenage and Steve Evans and the way they try and play. They'll use their unique principles effectively. They didn't score in the second half, and that'll be the biggest letdown, but the way that they try and play with that style isn't being spoken about enough. When looking at key players, I did a video on Pompey and their season so far, and I did a whole segment on the importance of Colby Bishop. Yengi versus Bishop has been the online talking point, I feel, a lot of the time in recent weeks, and for me, it's a total waste of time. It's total rubbish. 2 very different strikers that have very different sets of skills. They can be utilised in different games, both from the start and off the bench. Colby Bishop is a bagsman. You take away his goals last season, Pompey would have scored less than relegated MK Dons and Morecambe. This season, you take away his 13 goals, they would have scored less than Reading and the same as struggling Wycombe Wanderers. That's the headline, that's the impact, that's the difference. I don't think that conversation should be hitting the light of day. I really don't. I understand a lot of it's online. It's not the majority of Pompey fans. But Colby Bishop, for somebody who a few weeks ago everyone was sort of saying, better off without him, total nonsense. You're not better off without him. Use 2 strikers that can be used in different ways. Yesterday he scored and accumulated 3 big chances, a 100% shot accuracy, a 50% conversion rate, and 5 passes into the final third. If certain Pompey fans want to start preferring the handsome Australian neighbour for 46 games, full stop, that's fine. There'll be plenty of Bishop suitors this January. I can tell you that for free. The final game in real detail, Derby 2, Peterborough 3. The non-penalty XG 0.96 to 1.56. It was last-minute delight for Derby on Friday night. Come New Year's Day, it was the cruel reverse. For Derby, consistency is what will promote teams from League One, and after their performance on Friday night, I couldn't see that good run ending. They were immense at the Kassam Stadium, particularly in that second half. Derby looked like a side that had been pushing hard in recent weeks, and it felt quite jaded, slow and almost lethargic during the key moments of that match yesterday. A lot of this result comes down to the quality of Peterborough. Derby were mediocre, I thought, in all departments, but Peterborough in the attacking phase were a sight to behold. And let's touch on Peterborough because they deserve so much credit. That was some performance, an attacking display that will simply tear any team apart. And to tear Derby apart, who have been pretty good defensively, I'd say very good in recent weeks, you have to do something special. And oh boy, were they special. The speed, the build-up, the intricacy at points, this is why Posh are only 2 points away from the automatic promotion places. They can tear any outfit apart. 2024 has started with a lightning bang, and with more performances like that, it could be a very special year for Darren Ferguson's men. When looking at the graph in front of you now, it's not unusual to see Derby choose their moments to attack, but against the quality of Peterborough yesterday, the brief spells weren't enough. At Pride Park, Posh had no intention of moving away from the patterns that have served them so well in recent months. The controlled, front-footed style was clear for everyone to see and caused Derby problems in both halves time and time again. When looking at the stats, speaking of control, Peterborough dominated the ball throughout. The away side finished the game with 66% possession, making a total of 577 passes, 272 more than Derby. Possession doesn't win you football matches on its own, but with control, the ability to harm an opposition with patience or speed can be made far more flexible. Well, Peterborough, they can do both. They top the charts for total build-up attacks this season with 77, passes per sequence with an average of 3.88, and sequences with more than 10 passes within them with 313. But they also have the pace and desire to dribble. The away side attempted 13 take-ons in this match before. They've got the balance, and no matter who you put up against them, they're going to try and find a way of breaking you down. Poku, Mason Clark, Ricky J. Jones, the speed and ability to play quickly on the turnover, well, it's absolutely frightening. Let's touch on the average positions of Peterborough. On first glance, the Peterborough setup is as expected, but when you look again, there's one interesting point. The healthy gaps between players and clear structure shows just how dominant Posh were, but Harrison Burrows operated differently. More on his individual performance later because it was very, very impressive. Now let's focus on his general positioning in this game. By him tucking inside, it gave Peterborough an extra body in the midfield and gave them a numerical advantage in build-up. This allowed Mason Clark to remain wider and Randall to stay advanced in that number 10 position. It's modern, it's smart, it's risky at times, but it allows Burrows to use his technical set inverted heavily on the left-hand side. Let's touch on the key players now. It wasn't the result that Derby wanted, but James Collins was their shining light. A well-guided header for the first goal, a rebounded penalty for the second, not pretty but well executed. It was personally a good start to the year. But for Peterborough, there are a few names. Poku's goal involvement and 1v1 ability down the right-hand side was brilliant, and a really good guided header too as well from him. Ricky J. Jones scrambled it late on, but Harrison Burrows stood out. His positioning, we've spoken about that, inverted, using his technical ability to operate as an extra midfielder, at times in the way they slowly build up with patience and intricacy, using the talent they've got in the middle. As well as his goal, he accumulated one brilliant assist from a cross, 4 chances created, 9 passes into the final third, a 100% tackle success rate, and the most touches out of anyone on the pitch. Influential. So around the grounds we go. Barnsley 1, Wigan 1, Bristol Rovers lose away from home 3-2 to Wycombe Wanderers, Shrewsbury 3, Fleetwood 1 in Adam's first game in charge, Reading 3, Exeter 2, Pompey 2, Stevenage 1, Northampton 1, Cheltenham 0, Derby 2, Peterborough 3, Charlton 1, Oxford 2, Carlisle 2, Port Vale 1, Cambridge 0, Leyton Orient 2, Bolton 1, Burton 0, and Blackpool 2, Lincoln 0. Thank you so much for tuning in on this first edition of the Roundup in 2024. Thank you again for the support over the course of last year. It was phenomenal, and like I said at the start, it's time to do it all over again. Leave a like, subscribe, leave your thoughts in the comments down below, and I will see you all very, very soon. Thank you. Take care.